Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, General, for spending time with us today. I want to follow up first on Senator Graham's comments on detention of somebody we capture, a third country national. My impression is that there is really no plan as to what to do with them in the future.
Senator, we don't have a decision on what to do with them in the future. In fact, next week we have a team led by the Office of Secretary of Defense to come over and to work through this issue. This issue is not a new issue; it's been worked.
Right.
I just don't have the decision about the disposition of those detainees as we approach 2014.
What would be the risk of not agreeing to a plan for those detainees?
Well, Senator, these are people that absolutely have to be kept behind bars.
Well,
so we need a plan to detain these individuals in most cases on an enduring basis.
And is it our view that the Afghans would not be the best people to be in charge of these detainees?
Senator, I don't know if that's a viable alternative right now or not. First of all, I don't know what the Afghan desire would be for those third country nationals or the legal framework within which the Afghans would be able to keep them. The Afghans have moved to a evidence-based now process for detention operations. We, of course, use a law of armed conflict framework, and so I'm not sure that the Afghan process would allow us to keep those third country nationals detained beyond 2014. That's something we would have to take a very close look at.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. On the force, you mentioned about 350,000 Afghan forces. This would not be the police forces, but the other forces?
No, Senator, that's the aggregate of both the police and the Army, less the Afghan local police. So the 352,000 would be all the Afghan uniformed police,
right,
all the Afghan Army, the border police, and then over and above that 352,000 right now is the Afghan local police, which are approved for a level of 30,000.
And how big a problem does attrition continue to be?
Attrition in the Afghan Army is a significant challenge. We have nearly 30% attrition. In the police, it's much better. It's at or about the goal of 15 to 16%. The local police is very, very low. And so the Army is the area where attrition is of greatest concern.
And is it highest as you get closer to the fighting season?
Senator, we haven't seen a direct correlation between the fighting season and the attrition. We've seen a direct correlation between leadership and attrition.
I think Dunford does a real good job.
What size force, as you could contemplate us leaving? I guess I want two questions here. One is, what size force do we have to leave to get people and equipment out successfully? And then secondly, what size force should we hope that the Afghanis can maintain and sustain?
Senator, with regard to our equipment, there's really three aspects of closing down in Afghanistan. One is the retrograde equipment that would come back here to the United States to reset our services. The other is base closure and material reduction. The equipment that is needed to reset our forces, we will get that equipment out by the end of 2014. We will still, in all likelihood, be closing out bases and reducing materials, that is, returning the ground to the way we found it post-2014. And so we'll need some element to be able to do that. Currently, the size of that element is 2,500 soldiers that help us with that. I expect we'll need some similar organization post-2014. That's called a CENTCOM. It's a logistics unit that actually works for the United States Central Command. And with regard to the Afghans, I mean, I think we now are looking at that 352,000 force being sustained through 2018 as being the best recommendation.
And what level of help will the Afghanis need from outside to sustain a force that big?
In accordance with the Chicago Conference, Senator, they will need through 2018, the vast majority of the money necessary to sustain that force is going to come from the United States and international partners.
The vast majority of that money would come
absolutely.
from outside.
Of about $5 billion to sustain that force, the Afghans will pay approximately $500 million. So the preponderance of the resources necessary to sustain Afghan forces post-2014 would come from the international community in the United States.
And on removing our people from Afghanistan, at what point do you leave, at what point do the people that are there face real danger? And how many people do we need to leave there to safely get everything, the other people out?
Senator, there's a couple of things. One is that we'll make that decision based on the security environment, based on the capabilities and capacities of the Afghans who will provide the security environment within which we draw down. But as General Dempsey says, we're never going to ask 10 soldiers to do more than 10 soldiers worth of work, and we will very much shrink the perimeter, figuratively speaking, in Afghanistan in a way that keeps force protection first and foremost.
And one other question on facilities that we have there. You mentioned returning situation back to the way it was before the facility was built. Do we have any kind of process we go through with the Afghanis to decide if they'd like things left there that otherwise are just of no value?
We do, Senator. We have a very detailed plan for Afghan infrastructure to sustain Afghan forces post-2014. Some of that infrastructure is being transitioned from coalition forces to Afghans, but all the infrastructure that's over and above their ability to sustain over time, and we have a very detailed plan that links the infrastructure that the Afghans will maintain post-2014 with the resources we project will be available to sustain that infrastructure. We want to make sure there's a balance between the projected resources for sustainment and the numbers of facilities that the Afghans keep. So those facilities that cannot be sustained post-2014 are the ones I talked about that we would reduce back to the way we found it.
And do we go beyond just the military use of those facilities to hospital, school, some other use? Do we have a checklist like that or not?
We do, Senator. In fact, that's led by the Afghan government, the Minister of Finance. So if local governments want to have infrastructure, they submit a request up to the Minister of Finance. The Afghan government's responsible for determining the sustainability of that, and then the Minister of Finance would come to us with a request for a specific piece of infrastructure to be maintained.
Well, thank you, General. You've had a tough assignment, and it looks like to me it's not going to get a lot easier, and I wish you well with it, and you and those people you work with, thank you for what you do for us.
Thanks, Senator.